Well, I hope you're having a mighty fine morning. Thank you for coming to Sandy Bottom Homestead, and I'm glad you're here with us. But we got to talk about a subject today that took me a long time to figure out. And once I started to grasp it, not only did my production go up, but also I was able to plant more when I figured out how to break the rules. And not saying that I have it totally figured out, but this is just kind of me working through it year by year. And this is the steps that we're at this year. And we're going to be talking about spacing. But real quick, I got to show you something that I'm pretty proud of here. It's one day past the peak, and I hate that I missed it for you guys. But look at this beautiful, beautiful wisteria bonsai. It's a Japanese wisteria. Check that out. Isn't it just amazing? Love it. All right, if you're new to the channel, well, thank you for coming by. I'm so glad you're here with us. And if you're not new, thanks for coming back. But what you can see is we plant tight here. We plant very tight. We've got onions tightly planted. We've got taters tightly planted. We've got our lettuces tightly planted. So across the board, we do tightly plant most things. I really wanted to talk about this because it's the time of year when we're just about to start planting, and there's a lot of different paths we can take per se. So, you know, when you get started in the season, it's really easy to just like overplant immediately, but that's not a really good thing, and there's multiple reasons why. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the reasons why, and then I'm going to take you around my garden. I'm going to give you a couple examples of what's happened and how we can change that. And you'll see how this could all work. And particularly, or specifically, I'm going to show you the differences between cabbages that are well spaced and not well spaced. And then also some of the other plants, but there's benefits to all of this. Just look at that head of broccoli right there. I think it's done. What do you think? We're gonna come back and get that today. So that, as you see, was one of the benefits of well spacing, is the fact that the plant can actually grow. So when you're planting and you're cramming things in as tight as they can, some plants can do it and some plants can't. And root space is a big issue. They need room for the roots to grow, because you just can't see it. You don't really know what's going on under there. I mean, if you could do some kind of test or something, but let's be honest, none of us are going to do that. But you can see above ground how they look, but it's all about the roots. And I'm going to show you an example of a space that I've tried for a couple of years. I'm just going to have to abandon for specifically tomatoes. I've noticed over here on the cattle panel, so this side is connected to a 4x8 bed. So in reality, just with nothing in it, it's totally enough room for anything to put its roots up. And then over here is a 1x10 bed. And I really just did that so I could anchor it in, and it just didn't look kind of weird. But then I thought, well, hey, I'd like to grow tomatoes on it. So every year since I've had this cattle panel for 3 years now, I have tried to grow tomatoes in this bed. And I'll show you what it's looked like. First things first, peas. Awesome on the side of the cattle panel, and I'm going to try and do beans on it this year to see how that goes. So they do awesome. One thing the tomatoes do is they get about right here, and then they just stop. And I've only gotten a couple tomatoes off of them. I did one year, I did this side, and then one year I did this side. And this gets a little bit more shade, so I wanted to wait and see. I thought, well, maybe this one gets too much sun, but that wasn't the case. And I really just, after seeing the peas do what they do and how they grow, I really do think that it is just that there's just not enough space for the tomatoes to take hold. And before anybody says anything, I had put 2 tomatoes on here, one on this side and one all the way over here. So technically, laterally, there was enough space, but I think the roots just kind of wanted to grow more this way. Also tried to do pumpkins on here last year, and they just would not do it. But in comparison, the year before, I did a butternut squash, which was on this side, close enough to pumpkins, same growth patterns and everything. And the vine grew up and grew about 50 feet out of the garden. So I really do think it comes down to the space for it. So that kind of goes with anything, you know, root spacing, containers, anything like that. But specifically, even if we didn't have that 1x10 bed and we just jam-packed it full, the plant would struggle to get enough nutrients and to get its roots situated. And then there's another place where I did it last year, and we're gonna see this year. So this is another reason why I wanted to make this video, because as we prepare to plant for spring, I wanna be prepared to tell you or to show you what we're kind of testing and how I'm learning throughout the year. Last year in this bed, we had peppers in the back, and then we had a row of watermelons in the front. And my goal was to have the melons, it was watermelons here and cantaloupes here, was to have them grow out and over and just let them kind of take out how much ever space they wanted. And they did do that to an extent, but they just didn't do great. We had small melons, very few of them, and then it was really just the plant never really did thrive in this area. Now in comparison, we did another one before I put in these beds or anything, and I just kind of planted stuff and let it just do whatever the heck it wanted. I put a watermelon out here, and the vines grew all over, and we had like 3 or 4 50-pound watermelons that year. It was pretty crazy. So, you know, this year what we're gonna do is after these carrots come up, we're just gonna put 2 watermelon plants in there and give them all the room they need. And I mean, I do know that if you're trying to grow like a world record melon or something like that, that is a method you can do along with feeding extremely heavy. I'm not trying to go for world records. I'm trying to go for whatever makes me happy and whatever the plant is willing to produce. So you can see that I think the root space has a lot to do with it. And I'm sure if you guys know and you had experience with this, definitely comment below, because it's something that is very tricky to get a hold of. And it's easy this time of year when you're excited and you come over to an empty bed, a mostly empty bed, and you start planting it and you get little plants and you're like, I can put more in there and more. And next thing you know, you've got this wild jungle, and you're gonna produce food. You're going to get something to eat, but you may not get, and I don't think you're gonna get, at least my experience, as much as you could get if you properly space things. So just think about that. Now, here's another example, a real live example of what's going on with our cabbages. This is the bed that we had all winter, I had to think. And everything grew good. The spacing got jacked up, and I don't know if you've been watching the channel, you know I've been talking about this cluster here. So you can see there's 3 here, there was another one here, and then there's actually one here, and then one here, and it just kind of was really tight. And now you can see I harvested around this cabbage early and let it keep growing. And you can see the head, the size the head is. It's a pretty decent size, nothing to write home about. But then you look back here where these are struggling, and look at this. I mean, it's just piss poor. You know, same with that one. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and harvest them and be done. And this one actually, because it needed light, look at that. So this one slipped through the cracks, but it's got white mold on it. So we're gonna have to get rid of that one as well. But you can see how they were all touching and really close to each other. And actually, take that back. There was another one right here that we had to harvest. So for a while, they were really jam-packed in there. It's just me planting wrong and not really focusing on what I should be doing. So, you know, we've gotten a lot of cabbage out of there. It's been great, but now we need to kind of just clear it out and do that. Now, let me take you to the new bed that we did, where I recognize that, call back to another video. And so I rectified the situation, and I think this is the spacing I like, and I'm gonna show you. These are much newer plants. They are just about to start heading. They were planted for the spring. The other ones were planted in the fall to overwinter, so we could get an earlier harvest in the spring. But you can see how I think they're about maximum size at this point. And so they'll start heading up, and there is a little bit of touching, but it's not terrible. And so this is an 8-foot bed, 8x4. And in these 2 rows, I have 6 cabbages. Well, I technically have 5 in this one and 6 in this one. And looking at the 6, I think I would do 6 instead of 5 per row. So in this 4x8 bed, I could do 24 cabbages. So you definitely do, and this is part of the square foot gardening technique, which clearly they say you can plant a cabbage in a square foot. No, you can't, and that's okay. At least I can. Now, the thing behind it that is what works for square foot gardening is you have these leaves that are overlapping. And so what that does is that allows weeds not to pop up. It makes them struggle at least. and kind of it protects the soil. It keeps it moist longer. Same thing as like a mulch almost, but you're just creating shade on it. So there is that, and it does help with that, and you've got to find that happy medium. That's what a lot of this gardening stuff is about, is what is the happy medium. Take for instance this onion bed, okay? So this 8 by 1 foot row over here is all cabbage. Everything else is onions. There's 96 onions in here. And the reason why we do that is so it will shade out the competition for the weeds and stuff like that, because as you can see, as it gets bigger and as it starts to get overgrown, as it should, you're going to start struggling to get to some of the weeds. So we need to make sure that we keep that in mind, but planting tightly like they're supposed to be would be, imagine if you did an onion every foot. You know, you'd have an onion here, and then you'd have an onion here, and all in here would be nothing, you know? And that would just allow for that, for weeds to take over. And then you've got this here, you've got taters that are just 1 per square foot is what I did this year, and it's a nice gentle canopy. I can get in there. It doesn't seem to be too overly crowded, so there's just plenty of space in there. I think it's spaced just right this year, so I'm pretty happy with that. And you can see that everything's growing right. We come over here to the broccoli, and you can see how we spaced it. I did about 1 per square foot. Now here's where we can start breaking the rules. If you made it this far, good for you, because now we're going to break some rules. So what we did here is we planted this out, and we put 1 per square foot. I personally think they need about 18 inches per plant. That being said, you can see here that we have this bare corner. Why is that? Because I anticipated the broccoli being ready to be harvested mostly at the same time, and I would need to make space. So what I did is I knew that these broccolis were a little bit ahead of schedule, so I can cut them, and then that allowed these to get more sunlight and so on and so forth. So it's a cascading effect, I guess is the term I'm looking for. So you can see, let me show you how I'm going to harvest this, and you'll see the space that it's going to clear up. Come out here right now, I see there is a number of heads to harvest, but so first and foremost, we're definitely going to harvest this one. And then you can see when we harvest this one, it's going to create more space for that one. All right. And then we're also going to harvest this one. So then let's just say root space is an issue. I know my shadow's in the way, but you just have to deal with it. You're going to have this head and this head with nothing in the middle. And so that's going to give it more space to grow. And then we remove this one will get more space. That one will have more space. This one is getting a little bit shaded back here, so we need to be careful, but this can come out at any time. I'm not overly concerned about it. We'll get a fair amount of broccoli and we'll get a fair amount at once, but then it kind of stops, and then we can wait a week. And I'm telling you, this broccoli is growing by the day. I think it's at about, some of the heads are at maximum size, so we need to take care of it. But that's when you can start breaking the rules a little bit. When you start to understand the growth pattern and the harvest schedule, then you can start learning more about, hey, okay, let me do this, pull it out, create more space, cool, bada bing, bada boom. Give you one more example. To plant my lettuce super tight. It's really tight right now, but you can't really tell, but there's something going on in this bed that's really important. So what we did is, I have to come over here to show you. If you look on this one, so we have this lettuce and this lettuce, right? We seeded these heavy, and then they grew together, and we didn't thin them, okay? Because what we'll do now is we'll come back and I'll look at these and I'll say, okay, sometimes I'll take the smaller one. These are a little bit, because I've done others, which we'll get to, but right now I'd probably take this bigger one and then let this one grow. And then you can see, like, this is one we did. You can see down the line, we did this one and this one and this one, and you can look in the spacings between the plants. You can kind of see how they're spaced a little bit better. And so if we came over here and we did another harvest, see that? It would create space there. And this one's got 3, so we would take all but one of them. And then it would just create all that space. Look at this one right here. This is a little gem lettuce, but you can see it's together like that. So we would take this bigger one, leave the smaller one, and then it would create more space in this area. I know I can do that with lettuce. I know it's a possibility, and I know it works. So it works for me. And what that does is it allows me to plant 3 to 4 times the lettuce in the same space. Now the first harvest generally is going to be smaller, and I don't cut and come again. I'll take the whole thing and leave a plant, but I'm still getting more in that space because lettuce is okay with that. So a lot of times you understand that once you take it, it'll stop the growth on there and stop that competition, and it'll take off. And this is kind of cheating the system a little bit, which is kind of what we want to do, right? So don't take spacing for granted, let it go. And one thing that we do need to think about is the pests. So pests can jump from plant to plant, but ultimately what the thing is with spacing is diseases, because there's not enough airflow. So remember that if you've got long-standing crops, spacing is really important because it'll allow that airflow. And the ultimate goal is to do less trimming to allow for airflow. So you don't really want to rely on you trimming your plants. That should be an added bonus. You should already have built-in airflow plan for your crops that are growing close together, like that cabbage. That's an airflow issue, especially this time of year. If it didn't stay wet and it didn't fall over and I was on top of it, it wouldn't be an issue. So just kind of keep that in mind as you do this. So the pest isn't really, because the pest will move, they fly, they do whatever, you know, kind of is what it is. But disease is where you're going to protect the most. So create that airflow and don't rely on trimming. I can't express that enough, because invariably what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to keep up with it, and you're going to let it go, and then you're just going to have a plant suffer. And we don't want to do that. So work on your spacing and just remember these things, and hopefully this year your garden will not only be more easy to move around in, but you're going to produce more. And that's my goal for you.